All right, so get ready, because today we are going deep on a book I'm pretty sure is on that to-read pile of yours. Yeah, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumelt.
Huh.
And look, I know you haven't gotten to it yet, but that's fine. That's kind of the whole point of this deep dive. So think of this as us giving you the VIP Fast Pass to Strategic Mastery with, like, all the good stuff, none of the fluff.
Exactly. It's been out for over a decade, this book, but the main message is still surprisingly relevant today. And this goes way beyond just, business. This deep dive, it's about making better decisions, period, in like all parts of your life.
So let's get right to it. What exactly, good strategy? I mean, Rumelt really goes after a lot of what people call strategy. He's like, nope, that's not it.
He actually lays it out, a clear definition. Strategy is like a solid response to a big, significant challenge. And he calls out all the fake stuff, those wannabe strategies, like vague goals, those fluffy visions. Oh, and those ambitious plans that pretend to be actual strategy.
I love how he talks about this Web 2.0 conference he went to back in the day, all these like high-powered CEOs, but none of them could actually explain their strategy. It was hilarious.
Right. Rumelt would ask about strategy, and they'd just describe what their company did, like we're online or we connect people. No clue about the real challenges. No real plan of attack.
Sounds familiar, right? Like those strategic plans you see. All buzzwords, no substance.
Exactly. So to really show the difference, good versus bad strategy, Rumelt uses these really compelling historical examples. The one that always gets me is the Battle of Trafalgar, 1805.
Ah, yeah, high stakes. Napoleon versus the British Navy. Control of the seas hanging in the balance.
Huge stakes. So the British, led by Admiral Lord Nelson, they were up against a bigger fleet, the French and Spanish combined.
Huh?
And Nelson knew a head-on attack, the usual way, that was suicide.
Had to get creative, right?
Oh, yeah. Instead of lining up ships like the standard way, he split his fleet 2 columns, smashed right through the enemy line, concentrated his firepower, boom.
Wait, so he just tossed out the rule book and went full rogue?
He did. Brilliant move. He used the enemy's formation against them, and the rough seas worked in his favor. British crushed it, and that secured their naval dominance for like a century.
Okay, so that's like good strategy in action, super dramatic version.
Mm-hmm.
But what about, normal life? How does this work for us?
Rumelt's point is the same principles apply. Business, politics, even your personal life. Good strategy is about zeroing in on that core challenge, figuring out a unique way to overcome it, and then bam, all your resources, all your actions, laser-focused, maximum impact.
So it's not the goal, it's how you get there. Having a plan, the right plan.
You got it. And he contrasts Nelson's brilliance with these epic fails of bad strategy, like Enron and their whole bandwidth trading disaster.
Ah, Enron, the kings of arrogance. Wasn't their strategy basically, we're Enron, we win?
Pretty much. Hot new market, they dove right in, figured, hey, we're good at energy trading, bandwidth's a piece of cake.
Except bandwidth is like the opposite of energy, right? No physical product, super volatile prices. You can't, store bandwidth in a warehouse.
Exactly. No clue about the challenges of that market. Blind ambition, wishful thinking, that was their strategy. And, well, we all know how that ended.
Not well at all. Okay, so vague goals and blind ambition, out. What's in? Rumelt, what's the secret sauce here?
He calls it the kernel, this super powerful concept. It's the heart of your plan, the seed, with everything it needs to grow into success.
Okay, now I'm interested. The kernel. Tell me more. How do we even find this thing, and what does it even look like?
3 parts. Think of it like a recipe. A diagnosis, a guiding policy, and then coherent action.
3-part recipe for, strategic awesomeness.
Yeah. So first, diagnosis. Understanding the challenge, the nitty-gritty of it. Not just stating the problem, but really getting why the problem exists.
Like going to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
You don't just say, I feel bad. You explain the symptoms so they can figure out the real cause.
Right. Get to the root cause. Don't just mess around with the symptoms.
Okay, diagnosis done. Now what? This guiding policy. What's that all about?
This is your approach, your overall plan for tackling that challenge you just figured out. The how, basically.
So, if my car's broken, the diagnosis tells me what's wrong. The guiding policy is, do I fix it myself? Mechanic. Or maybe it's time for a new car.
Nailed it. And a good policy, it keeps you focused. Your energy, your efforts, they go where they matter most.
And then the grand finale, coherent action. This is where we actually do something, right?
That's it. Turning your plan into reality. Specific steps, coordinated, all working together.
It's like having a blueprint, right, for an amazing house. But no construction crew to build it. Useless.
Rumelt's point is the actions have to match your diagnosis and your policy. That's what makes them coherent. Creates this powerful force for change.
Okay, so recap. The kernel, our three-part recipe. Diagnose, policy, action. Sounds simple enough, but I'm betting it's a lot harder to actually pull off.
It is. It takes work, strategic thinking. To see how it works, let's look at Steve Jobs when he came back to Apple in '97. I think you'll appreciate this one.
The ultimate comeback kid. I mean, Apple was like circling the drain.
They were in deep trouble. The company was bloated, losing money. Their products were, Everyone was wondering what Jobs would do. New product lines, merge with somebody.
So what'd he do?
He did something that seems obvious now, but it was a total shock at the time. He shrunk the company.
Shrunk it. Made Apple smaller. That's not very Steve Jobs, is it? Wasn't he all about think different and going big?
He was, but this was strategic genius. He saw the problem. Apple was unfocused, trying to do too many things, not doing any of them well.
So his policy was survive, back to basics, rebuild from there.
Exactly. He slashed product lines, cut staff, even moved manufacturing overseas, Taiwan, to cut costs. Painful, but it worked. Focus on a few core products, streamlined operations. That's what laid the foundation for Apple's comeback.
Wow, that's amazing. Clear diagnosis, bold policy, total turnaround.
It is. And Rumelt contrasts this with companies that they just didn't get it. They confused goals with strategy, ambitious plans like Chad Logan, his 2020 plan, or Brewer with his never-ending list of objectives.
So they had ideas, but no real plan to actually achieve them, mistaking the what for the how.
Exactly. A good kernel cuts through all that. Clarity, that's what it brings.
Yeah.
No more wishy-washy plans, just real focused action.
Okay, so we've got this powerful kernel now. Anything else we need to know about building a winning approach?
Another key concept, the proximate objective, breaking down those big, audacious goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
It's like a stepping stone, right?
Yeah.
The impossible suddenly seems possible, one bite at a time.
Exactly. The proximate objective, it's that achievable stepping stone. Makes the big goal less scary, helps you build momentum. And speaking of audacious, Rumelt uses this amazing example, President Kennedy and the moon mission.
Yeah, aiming for the moon. Back in the 60s, that was pure science fiction.
Right. Landing a man on the moon in less than 10 years seemed impossible. But Kennedy, he was a strategic mastermind. He knew he had to break down this grand vision into achievable steps.
So instead of just moon mission, he laid out these proximate objectives.
Yeah.
Smaller goals that would build toward that ultimate goal.
Precisely. Unmanned exploration, bigger rockets, developing different types of fuel, lunar landing module, all of it. Proximate objectives that turned the impossible into, well, possible.
I get it. It's like planning a road trip. You don't just focus on the final destination. You map out those stops along the way. Makes the trip less overwhelming, plus you might discover some cool stuff along the way, right?
You got it. Another key thing about proximate objectives, they got to be doable, feasible. Kennedy didn't just pick random stuff. He picked steps that built on what they already knew, the technology, the expertise. Ambitious, yeah, but grounded in reality.
So even with a moon mission, it's all about strategic, manageable steps. Pretty cool.
It's brilliant. And this isn't just for presidents or astronauts. Think about yourself. Have you ever had a project or goal that seemed totally overwhelming? Maybe like that stack of books by your bed you've been meaning to read.
Okay, now you're just being mean. But you're right. It's easy to get overwhelmed. Just give up before you even start.
That's where the proximate objective comes in. What's the most important step you can take right now? Focus on that, and suddenly the big picture isn't so scary.
It's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles. It starts with one step.
Right. Okay, back to Rumelt. He had that example about the lunar lander team, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They had this huge challenge. They didn't know what the moon's surface was like. Was it powdery, rocky, full of crystals? Designing a lander was a nightmare.
Yeah, packing for a trip with zero clue about the destination or the weather. Do I bring a swimsuit or a parka?
Exactly. But the engineers figured it out. Instead of trying to design a lander for everything, they focused on one thing. A vehicle that could land safely no matter what. So they simplified the problem. A clear, achievable goal that moved them forward.
Yes. The proximate objective, it was their guiding star. They made progress even though everything was uncertain.
So it's not just about making big goals less scary. It's about those strategic stepping stones. Clarity, momentum, even when you don't know what's coming next, Man, this deep dive is packed with good stuff.
And we're just getting started. Rumelt goes on to talk about how good strategy, it takes your inherent strengths and it uses them to exploit opportunities.
Sounds like a winning formula. Lay it on me.
He uses Walmart, Sam Walton, classic example. Back in the day, Walmart was just another discount store, tons of competition.
So what set them apart? Just low prices?
That was part of it. But the real key was Walton changed the whole perspective. He didn't just see individual stores, he saw a network for distribution.
So he wasn't thinking about selling stuff. He was thinking about how to get that stuff to people efficiently.
Exactly. He created this hub and spoke system, centralized warehouses, trucking network, the whole thing. Undercut competitors on costs, offered more products.
He basically invented the modern supply chain.
He was a pioneer. And this is Rumelt's point. Good strategy is about interesting advantages.
Interesting advantages. Okay, what does that even mean?
Advantages that you can, amplify and make them even stronger. Walmart, it wasn't just about low costs. It was about having a system that made costs go even lower as they grew.
So it's not a one-time thing. It's an advantage that keeps getting stronger, like a snowball rolling downhill, bigger and bigger.
Perfect. And Rumelt compares this to, eBay. They were the big dogs in online auctions, but their value just wasn't going up.
So they had a good position, but they weren't doing anything, what was the word, interesting with it.
Right. Great platform, but they weren't using it to create more value or go into new markets. He has this thought experiment about a silver machine. Imagine a machine that makes $10 million worth of silver a year for free.
Wow, that's a machine I want.
Right. The owner buys it for under $1 million, a bargain. But the thing is, the silver market, it's pretty stable. Owner can't really do much to make that machine more valuable.
I see. Great asset, but it's not interesting because there's no real strategy you can apply to it. Just silver, silver, silver.
Exactly. Now think about, Starbucks. They took coffee, a simple commodity, and built an empire. A unique experience, the brand, all those stores.
They made coffee interesting.
Yes. Rumelt also talks about Stuart and Linda Resnick, the entrepreneurs behind Teleflora, POM Wonderful, FIGI Water. They just keep finding these interesting advantages in different industries.
Flowers, pomegranates, bottled water. What's their secret?
They spot hidden potential, and then they build these systems around those advantages, like FIGI Water. They didn't just sell water. They created this whole mystique about it, the purity, the exotic source.
So the takeaway is it's not just about any advantage. It's about finding the ones you can actually DO something with, amplify them, exploit them.
Exactly. And this brings us to another big element of good strategy. Got to understand and navigate those waves of change.
Okay, now things are getting tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we even predict those massive shifts that are always reshaping the world, like those rogue waves that can sink even the best ship?
It's not about predicting the future exactly. It's about understanding the forces at play, making educated guesses about how they might change things.
So like being a surfer, right? You don't know when and where the next wave will break, but you can read the ocean, position yourself to catch it.
That's it. Rumelt also says, we got to understand the history of change. We always think things are changing so fast, NW, but we forget about those huge shifts that already happened.
So true. We get all hyped up about the latest gadgets and trends, but things have always been changing.
Exactly. And he uses the switch from mainframes to personal computers. Massive wave of change.
The PC revolution totally changed everything, how we live, how we work.
And it wasn't just the tech itself, it was the ripple effect. It changed entire industries.
Like how software became this huge force going up against those big hardware companies. Suddenly, it wasn't about building the best computer. It was about the software on those computers.
That's it. And then the internet came along and, well, that was that.
Okay, so back to understanding these waves. Rumelt talks about Cisco systems. They rode 4 airwaves of change, right, to become super successful.
Right. They're like the poster child for adaptation. First wave, the rise of local area networks, LANs, inside corporations.
So companies connecting their computers together, those internal networks.
Exactly. Cisco, with their routers, they were right there to capitalize on that.
Okay, and then wave number 2.
Unix-based workstations. Those powerful machines replacing the old mainframe terminals. And guess what? They needed routers to connect to the network.
So Cisco was in the right place at the right time again.
Right. Wave 3, the internet becoming a commercial thing. Everyone wanted to connect, and they needed, you guessed it, routers. Cisco's expertise. Suddenly, everyone wanted it.
They were like the gatekeepers of the internet.
Exactly. And then, boom, wave 4, the internet explodes, everyone's using it.
The .com boom, everyone online.
Yeah.
Cisco was right there. providing the infrastructure.
Exactly. Cisco, they adapted, they evolved, they rode those waves, didn't get swept away. Rumelt's point is, we can't predict the future, but we can pay attention to trends and look for attractor states.
Attractor states. Now we're getting fancy. Explain, what's an attractor state?
It's like a likely outcome based on what's happening now. Not a guaranteed prediction, but a way of thinking about where things are headed.
So instead of trying to know the future, we use these attractor states to make better decisions. Where to invest our time, our energy, our resources.
Exactly. He has good examples like the rise of mobile devices. Remember those clunky desktops? Now everyone's on their smartphones. Or personalized news feeds. We're all in our own little bubbles these days. Or the trend towards more specialized media. Niche content for every interest. It's crazy.
All happening right now. It's amazing how Rumelt's ideas from way back then are still so spot on.
They are. Understanding the forces at play, looking for those attractor states, that's how you navigate this ever-changing world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. The kernel, proximate objectives, interesting advantages, riding the waves of change. But wait, there's more. Rumelt talks about these two forces that can totally sabotage even the best strategies: inertia and entropy.
The villains of the strategic world, always lurking, ready to mess things up.
So, what exactly are they, and how do they ruin everything?
Think of inertia as like resistance to change. A giant ship trying to turn around, it takes forever, even with the engines full blast.
Big organizations, right? Stuck in their ways, even when the world's changing fast. It's like they're trying to sail a pirate ship in a Formula One race.
Exactly. And that can be fatal. Rumelt uses Continental Airlines after deregulation to show what happens.
Continental, didn't they have some trouble back in the 80s?
Big trouble. New competitive landscape, but they were stuck in the old ways. Disaster.
So like that big ship trying to navigate a harbor that's suddenly full of speedboats.
Right. They kept focusing on those long routes, old pricing models. Thought fares would always cover costs.
Living in the past, huh?
They were. And then there's entropy. That's the tendency for things to fall apart, to become disorganized. Any system.
So inertia's being stuck, entropy is like falling apart. Like a garden that used to be beautiful, now it's all weeds and chaos.
You got it. And in organizations, entropy can be deadly. He uses this example, Denton's, a family business. They didn't pay attention to structure, to coherence, and it just became inefficient. Like those before pictures on home makeover shows, you know, before they fix everything up.
Right, right. A house divided against itself cannot stand.
There are.
So these are our villains, inertia and entropy. Always there, ready to mess up our plans. How do we fight back? How do we beat them?
Well, Rumelt, he has this concept. It's called the chain link system.
Chain link system. Kind of a heavy-duty name. How's that about strategy?
It's a way to think about organizations. All the parts are connected. They depend on each other, like links in a chain, you know. One weak link, the whole thing's messed up.
Right, right. So in a chain link system, you can't just fix one part. You got to look at the whole chain, find those weaknesses that are holding everything back.
Exactly. And that's where leadership comes in. Strategic leadership. Rumelt talks about this guy, Marco Tonelli. Took over his family's business. It was struggling, and he turned it around using this chain link thinking.
Okay, tell me about Marco's big makeover. Was it like those reality shows where they come in and like revamp the whole business?
Kind of. When Marco took over, they had a bunch of problems. Quality issues, sales team didn't know the technical stuff, and costs were through the roof.
Sounds like a company stuck in a rut, just churning out the same old stuff, hoping for the best.
It was. But Marco, he didn't try to fix things separately. He saw how it was all connected, those chain links.
So what did he do? Did he hire a bunch of consultants with their fancy PowerPoints?
Nope, he just got to work. Focused on one link at a time, started with quality, set a clear goal, improved quality to meet a specific standard, and he took charge, personally, got the team on board, made it the priority.
So he was like the chain link warrior, strengthening that weakest link. No more rusty links in his chain.
Yes, and once they got the quality up, he moved on to the next link. The sales team, they needed to know the technical side better, and finally, he dealt with the costs, but only after the other links were strong.
So he was working his way down the chains, link by link, making it stronger.
Exactly. And the results were amazing. Company went from struggling to, like, crushing it, all because of that chain link approach.
Okay, but this isn't just for businesses, right? This chain link thinking. It could be a team, a project, even personal stuff, like finally cleaning out my closet that I keep putting off.
Totally. It's about seeing those connections, fixing the weak links that are holding you back. And speaking of well-designed systems, Rumelt uses IKEA as an example.
IKEA. Cheap furniture, Swedish meatballs, and those instructions, I swear they're written in code. What's their chain link secret?
IKEA's got it down. It's not just low prices or trendy designs, it's how everything fits together, their policies, their operations, everything.
So it's like a perfectly tuned machine, every part working in sync. Kind of like those Rube Goldberg contraptions where one thing leads to the next and then something surprising happens at the end.
Yes. Their furniture designs, flat pack, easy to ship and store. Their self-service model keeps costs down. Global supply chain, lowest prices on materials. It's all designed to support their main strategy, affordable, stylish furniture for everyone.
And that creates an advantage, right? Because competitors can't just copy one thing. They got to copy the whole system. That's tough.
Exactly. A well-designed chain link system, it's like a barrier, keeps competitors out. But it's not just efficiency and costs. Rumelt, to show the power of coordinated action, he takes us back in time. The Battle of Cannae, 216 BC.
Right, back to Roman times. I'm sensing a theme here. Rumelt loves his history. Okay, I'm in. Who was fighting who and what was going on?
The Carthaginians, led by Hannibal, one of the greatest generals ever against the Romans. The Romans, they were the big dogs back then.
And Hannibal, he was the one with the elephants, right? Crossing the Alps with elephants? Talk about a logistical nightmare.
That's him. But the elephants were just part of his planet Cannae. He had a much smaller army, but he knew what he was doing.
Okay, tell me about it. How did he win? Did the elephants, like, do a synchronized dance number or something?
I wish. No, Hannibal, he coordinated his actions, perfectly timed, perfect positioning. He made it look like he was retreating in the center, but his cavalry on the wings, they surrounded the Romans.
Like a pincer move, right? Trapping the enemy, squeezing them from both sides.
Exactly. The Romans, they pushed forward into that retreating center, but it was a trap. They got squeezed tighter and tighter. They couldn't move. They lost their formation.
So he used the Roman strength, their numbers, against them. That's genius.
Pure genius. The Romans, trapped and disorganized, they got crushed. Tens of thousands of soldiers lost in a single day.
Strategic beatdown. He outmaneuvered them big time. So what's the lesson here? Military tactics? Or is there something bigger?
Hannibal, he shows the power of coordination. It's not just about individual strengths, it's about how they work together for a decisive win.
So whether it's running a business, leading a team, or just tackling my to-do list, the lesson is clear. Coordinated action, that's the key. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Right, and this brings us to another crucial element of good strategy. Design.
Design. Thought we were talking strategy, not like art class. We're going to start picking out fonts now.
Not exactly. But Rumelt's point is we got to think like designers when we're crafting strategies.
Okay, how does that work?
Think of strategy as a big design problem. You're not just dealing with individual pieces, you're creating a system where those pieces work together seamlessly.
Like building a house. You can't just randomly throw up some walls, a roof, some plumbing, and hope it works. You need a blueprint, a design that makes it all come together functionally.
That's it. He uses this thought experiment, designing a sports car.
Ooh, sports cars. I'm listening.
So, you're designing the ultimate sports car, the best driving experience ever. You could just use the best parts, right? The engine, the transmission, the brakes, all top of the line. But would that be enough?
I'm guessing probably not. You might end up with a Frankenstein car, all the right parts, but doesn't really work together.
That's right. A great sports car, it needs more than just good parts. It needs a design that integrates those parts into a whole, a seamless whole.
So you got to think about how the engine works with the transmission, how the suspension affects the handling, how the weight is distributed. It's about making all those parts work together in harmony.
Beautifully put. Rumelt says the same thing applies to strategy. It's not just good ideas. It's a system where those ideas work together to achieve something specific.
This is blowing my mind. Strategy is design. It's not just planning analysis. It's creative problem-solving design thinking.
Yes. And to show how this works, Rumelt talks about his own experience. He was a systems engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, designing missions to Jupiter.
Designing spacecraft? That's intense. You can't exactly pull over to the side of the road if something goes wrong out there.
That's for sure. Rumelt, he had to think about all the different systems, communications, power, attitude control, everything, and how those systems work together.
Like a giant space puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Getting all those pieces to fit just right.
It is. And the whole mission, it depended on how well they integrated those pieces. But let's bring it back to Earth for a minute. How does this design thinking work for, like, business strategy?
Yeah, good point. Spacecraft are cool, but I'm more interested in, like, world domination. or at least conquering my inbox.
Well, Rumel has another great example, Alfred Sloan at General Motors back in the 1920s.
GM. Weren't they kind of a mess before Sloan took over?
They were. Just a bunch of different brands all competing with each other, confusing the customers.
So what'd Sloan do? Did he bring in those efficiency experts with their stopwatches?
He did something much smarter, design thinking. He created this hierarchy of brands, Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, Cadillac. Each one targeted a different price point, different customers.
It's like a ladder of brands, each rung appealing to different people. You start with a Chevy, and maybe one day you work your way up to a Cadillac.
Exactly. Reduced the competition inside the company and made it clearer for the customers.
So Sloan's design thinking, it turned GM from chaos into a well-oiled machine. It's like taking those mismatched parts from that Frankenstein car and making a sleek, high-performance sports car.
You got it. Rumelt's point is, strategy is not just making decisions. It's creating a design that aligns your whole organization, your whole system.
This is making me rethink everything. It's not just goals and actions. It's designing a system that supports them.
That's it. And to show this, he uses another example, this time from tech, the rise of 3D graphics chips.
Okay, getting more modern now. Maybe a little less Roman Empire, a little more Silicon Valley.
It is. But it shows how good strategy often means understanding how complex systems work. Early 90s, everyone knew 3D graphics, they were going to be huge on PCs.
Wasn't the tech kind of bad back then, though? I remember those early 3D games, they were, well, not exactly Pixar quality.
Yeah, pretty basic. But the question was, what would make 3D graphics take off? Some people thought it would be like virtual tourism or real estate application.
But we'd all be touring the Louvre virtually or walking through model homes on our computers.
Right, but it never happened. What actually made 3D graphics take off?
Don't tell me it was gamers.
Yeah.
Right. Always pushing the limits with their need for more realistic explosions and stuff.
You got it. Online, multiplayer first-person shooter games.
Ah, yes. Those games where you run around shooting each other. I might have played a few myself.
Right. And those games, they needed faster, more powerful 3D graphics chips. If your graphics card wasn't good enough, you were toast.
So those games, they drove innovation. The faster the chip, the better the gameplay, the more bragging rights you had.
Exactly. And Rumelt talks about NVIDIA. They were focused on multimedia, but they changed their strategy, went all in on gaming.
So they saw the trend, and they went for it.
They did. Smart move. They ditched their old approach to graphics, and they embraced the industry standard, the triangle-based rendering from Silicon Graphics.
So they went with the flow, adopted the tech that was best for gaming.
Yep. And they invested heavily in chips that could handle what gamers wanted. They even partnered with Microsoft to make sure their chips worked great with DirectX.
All in on the gaming revolution.
They were, and it paid off. NVIDIA became the leader in 3D graphics. Their chips, they're in everything now, gaming PCs, workstations, even those AI applications.
It's crazy to think those ultra-realistic games we play now, they're kind of a result of that strategic shift NVIDIA made way back then.
They are. Rumelt's point is, good strategy is about seeing patterns, making connections that others miss.
Like those connect-the-dots puzzles, right? Got to see the whole picture.
That's it. And to make those connections, you got to pay attention, think critically, and always question what you think you know.
This has been amazing. So much good stuff. But we're not done, right? Rumelt, he even talks about how we think, doesn't he?
He does. Gets really deep here. His point is, good strategy, it's not just knowledge and experience, it's a way of thinking.
Okay, time to upgrade my brain. What's the secret? Do I need, like, a new mental operating system?
Maybe. Luckily, Rumelt gives us some tools, some techniques to make us think more strategically. He starts with, our brains have limitations. We have biases, we jump to conclusions, we don't like to question ourselves.
Sounds like the human brain is kind of a buggy piece of software.
It can be. But Rumelt has tools to help us. One of the simplest but most powerful is making a list.
A list. Seriously. That seems way too basic. I make lists all the time, groceries, to-dos, but I never thought of them as like a strategy tool.
I know, right? Sounds simple. But when you write things down, it makes you clarify your thoughts, figure out what's really important.
So it's not just random ideas, it's using the list to like organize our thinking, to force us to prioritize.
Exactly. Rumelt says even a basic list can help us find those key challenges, prioritize what we want to achieve, even uncover hidden opportunities.
The list, it's like a mental decluttering tool. Helps us focus on what matters. Marie Kondo for your brain.
Exactly. Rumelt tells this story about a conversation he had with a senior manager early in his career.
I love a good story. Tell me about it. The power of the list.
So Rumelt, he was young, inexperienced, interviewing this manager, Fred Fletcher, about his company's strategy.
Asking the usual questions, right? Trying to sound all smart and stuff.
He was, and Fletcher, being a seasoned executive, he gave good answers, talked about his plans, his priorities. But at the end, Fletcher said something surprising. He told Rumelt that was the most valuable conversation he'd had all year.
Really? Just from answering some strategy questions. What made it so valuable?
Rumelt wondered the same thing. He was confused. But years later, he figured it out.
Okay, I gotta know. What was the big revelation?
Rumelt realized, talking about strategy, it made Fletcher think about his own list, his priorities, his challenges, what was most important.
Ah, so the interview was like a trigger. It made Fletcher reflect, reassess. Like sometimes you got to say it out loud to hear it.
That's it. The power of the list. It's not just information. It's a way to spark deeper thinking, and then you can actually do something.
Mind blown. Who knew a list could be so powerful?
It's a secret weapon. Rumelt also talks about the problem-solution framework.
Problem solution. Okay, that one makes sense. What's the key idea?
It's about how we think about problems, how we frame them, the way we define a problem. It influences the solutions we come up with.
Like those optical illusions, right? You
Yeah.
see different things depending on how you look at it.
Yes. If we define a problem too narrowly, we miss solutions. Define it too broadly, we get overwhelmed. Like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, right? Wrong definition, wrong solution.
Okay, so how do we get it right? That perfect framing so we find the best solutions.
He uses TiVo, the DVR company, as an example.
Ah, TiVo. They were ahead of their time, pausing live TV, skipping commercials. It was magic.
But didn't they get overtaken by, like, cable companies with their own DVRs?
They did. And Rumelt says part of the reason was how they framed the problem they were trying to solve.
So how did TiVo see it? What was their role in the market?
They thought they were just giving people a way to time shift TV, pause, rewind, record. But Rumelt says that was too narrow. They missed the bigger picture. Those cable companies, they controlled the set-top box market.
Right. Great product. But TiVo was stuck. They were playing in someone else's game, and those guys weren't sharing.
Exactly. TiVo couldn't reach more people, couldn't make more money.
So if they'd thought about it differently, like how to get around those cable companies, maybe partner with TV makers, create their own ways to get to customers, better strategy maybe.
That's the point. Think about the whole context when you're defining a problem. Don't just look at the surface. Go deeper. Find the root causes. This is changing how I think about problem solving. It's so easy to get stuck on that first way of seeing it. But stepping back, looking from different angles, that opens up new possibilities.
Exactly. And Rumelt, he has another tool for this, the create-destroy technique.
Create, destroy. Sounds kind of intense. What's that about? Do we get to smash stuff?
No smashing. It's about challenging what we assume to be true and finding those unusual solutions. Rumelt says we get stuck in our old ways of thinking, and that blocks us from seeing new possibilities.
If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten, right?
Yep. Create, destroy, it's about shaking things up, considering those crazy ideas.
So how does it work? Do I need like a special app for this?
Nope, no app needed. Rumelt says start by identifying the key parts of a situation, a system. Then imagine those parts are gone, destroy them in your mind, see what happens.
So like a thought experiment. Break the rules, see what happens. What if there was no gravity? What if we could teleport? What if cats could fly?
Exactly. Let your mind go wild. And then after you destroy, you create new solutions, new approaches, things that weren't possible before. Like, what if we could redesign the whole world? What would it look like?
Love it. It's like a gym workout for our strategic thinking. Yeah. Okay, what else does Rumelt have up his sleeve?
He's a big fan of the panel of experts.
A panel of experts?
Yes.
Sounds formal. Do we actually have to get a bunch of wise people together every time we make a decision?
Not really. It's more like a mental model. Yeah. It says, imagine a panel of people you respect. Could be people you know, could be people you admire from afar.
So it's like imaginary advisors, always there to give you advice, challenge you. Your personal board of directors without the boring meetings.
That's it. And you use this panel to critique your ideas, test your assumptions, see things from different angles.
This is awesome. Brainstorming, 24/7, and no awkward silences.
Right. Rumelt actually talks about Steve Jobs, how Jobs became part of his own mental panel.
Steve Jobs. Talk about a high-powered mentor. Did Rumelt have some secret meeting with him where they talked about like the future of tech?
Not quite. Rumelt was teaching at Stanford, and Jobs was in the audience. During a Q&A, Rumelt was talking about this program he was involved in, training entrepreneurs.
And Jobs, being the entrepreneur extraordinaire, he was interested.
He was, but he also challenged Rumelt, asked him to name any successful Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who came out of the program.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It was. And Rumelt, after a pause, had to say there weren't any.
Ouch. That had to hurt.
It did. But what Jobs said, well, then you failed, it stuck with Rumelt. And from then on, Jobs was part of his mental panel.
So even a tough critique from a tech icon can be a valuable lesson.
It can. Rumelt says he often uses Jobs' perspective to challenge his own thinking. He asks himself, what would Steve do?
It's like having the ghost of Steve Jobs whispering strategic advice in your ear. Okay, so we've got this amazing panel of experts in our heads. How do we actually use them?
No need for formal meetings. Just imagine how each expert would react to your problem, your idea. Ask yourself, what would Steve Jobs think? Or how would Warren Buffett handle this? Or even, what would Oprah do?
Love it. It's not about copying them. It's about using their way of thinking to challenge yourself, see things differently. And hey, if we're going to have an imaginary panel, might as well go big, right?
Absolutely. It can really help you break through those mental blocks, find those hidden opportunities. It's like having a whole team of strategic superheroes on your side.
Okay, I'm sold. Got to start building my dream team of advisors. Jobs, Buffett, Oprah. Who else should I add?
That's up to you. Who do you admire? Whose thinking do you respect? Who pushes you to be better?
This deep dive has been like a masterclass. So much good stuff. The kernel, proximate objectives, those interesting advantages, inertia and entropy, and now all these tools to make us think better. My brain's feeling upgraded already.
It's been a journey. And remember, this is just a taste of what Rumelt's got in this book. Good strategy, bad strategy. If you want to level up your thinking, make better decisions, you got to check out the full book.
Absolutely. Link to the book on Amazon is in the description below. And while you're there, subscribe to our YouTube channel, One Book a Day, for more deep dives into all kinds of amazing ideas.
Thanks for joining us on this strategic adventure. So we've talked about all these great tools, for sharpening our thinking and making better decisions. But there's one more thing Rumelt really emphasizes, and it might surprise you. It's history.
History. Okay, I'm intrigued. I mean, I love a good historical documentary, but what's that got to do with strategy?
Well, he says a lot of the mistakes we make in strategy, business, even our personal lives, they come from not learning from the past. We get so caught up in the present, like our situation is unique and we forget to look back, see what others have done before us.
Like we're all reinventing the wheel, thinking our wheel is like special or something.
Exactly. And he uses a perfect example, the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, talk about a major fail to learn from history.
2008. Yeah, that was a rough one. Housing bubble, banks collapsing, the whole world economy almost went down the drain. What kind of historical connections does Rumelt make?
He says 2008, it wasn't something new. It was just the latest in a long line of financial bubbles and crashes going back centuries. He talks about the panics of 1819, 1837, 1873, 1893, all the same basic ingredients. Easy credit, people speculating, and that belief that this time is different, which is always a bad sign.
It's like we're programmed to repeat the same mistakes. The greed, the arrogance, the short-term thinking, never-ending cycle.
It does seem that way sometimes. And Rumelt says one thing that really messed people up in 2008 was that inside view we talked about earlier.
Right, that tunnel vision where we're so focused on our own little world that we miss the bigger picture.
Exactly. People were so obsessed with the housing boom, convinced that prices would just keep going up forever. They ignored all the warning signs, all the lessons from history.
It's like those Wile E. Coyote cartoons, when he runs off a cliff. He's hanging in the air for a second before he realizes, uh-oh, gravity.
That's a great analogy. They thought the U.S. housing market was somehow different. The rules didn't apply to them.
And we all know what happened next. Prices crashed, the bubble burst, and the global economy went into a tailspin.
Exactly. Rumelt's point is, understanding history isn't just about knowing dates and names. It's about seeing those patterns, those cycles that have been happening in economies, businesses, societies, forever.
So it's like having a crystal ball, but instead of trying to predict the future, you're using it to understand the past, right? To see those echoes, those rhymes that help you make sense of the present.
That's a great way to put it. And this applies to so much more than just finance, right? Think about your career, your relationships, any decision you make.
So how do we avoid these mistakes in the future? How do we break free from that inside view and get a better understanding of history? Do we all need to become, history professors or something.
Well, it wouldn't hurt. But it's not about memorizing everything. It's about being curious about the past, looking for those lessons, those insights that can help you today.
So crack open a history book, watch a documentary, listen to your grandparents tell stories about the good old days.
Exactly. And don't just stick to one source, right? Look for different perspectives. Talk to people who have different experiences, different points of view.
It's like that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Right.
Surround yourself with people who challenge you, make you think differently.
Exactly. Challenge your own assumptions. Look for different perspectives. That's how you see the world with fresh eyes, how you make better decisions.
Man, this deep dive has been a wild ride. It's not just about understanding strategy. It's about understanding ourselves.
Yeah.
Our biases, how we think.
It has been a fascinating exploration. And remember, this is just a taste of what Rumelt has in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. He goes deep on competitive dynamics, leadership, innovation, all sorts of stuff. If you want to level up your thinking, make smarter decisions, you got to read the whole book.
Absolutely. You'll find a link to Good Strategy, Bad Strategy on Amazon in the description below. And hey, while you're at it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, One Book a Day, for more awesome deep dives into the world of ideas.
Thanks for joining us on this strategic adventure.
And remember, like Rumelt says, a good strategy is a specific and coherent response to an approach for overcoming the obstacles to progress. Until next time, keep those strategic minds sharp.